We are back. Coastal towns, river communities, and tens of thousands of salmon fishermen and women, businesses and employees that serve both the sport and commercial salmon fishery are now assured they'll see no income for the second year in a row with the official closure of the 2024 salmon season. And that is from a press release from the Golden State Salmon Association. And here to talk about it is the executive director of the Golden State Salmon Association, Scott Artis. Scott, welcome back to A Rude Awakening.
Yeah, thanks for having me on your show, Sabrina. This is a very critical issue for, as you mentioned in the press release, tens of thousands of people, not just even in California, but it stretches into Oregon. So that really just shows the breadth of what is happening with California salmon and how it affects other states.
Yeah, most definitely. So, you and your cohorts have deduced that this is due to, or partly due to, and of course, you're here to clarify, water policies put forth by the governor, by Governor Gavin Newsom's administration. So, talk to us about that and put that whole story together for us, because this is the second year in a row and we're talking about livelihood. We're talking about livelihood for tens of thousands of folks, just like you said. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's definitely round two for California salmon and all those employees, those families, those ecosystems that sometimes get which is weird in California to think that we sometimes move away from the ecosystem idea and argument, but those are being impacted as well. And so it's all these families, all these people, these ecosystems that are directly or indirectly reliant upon healthy salmon fishery are being impacted. And in April, the Pacific Fishery Management Council closed the ocean salmon fishing season for the second year in a row. And in May, just recently, the California Fish and Wildlife Commission closed the river salmon season. So it's a complete shutdown because of low populations of those fall run Chinook. And I think it's important to note that California has really four distinct Chinook salmon runs. There's a fall, late fall, winter, and spring. These are genetically different ones that come up at different times of the year. And the winter and spring runs have seen periods of alarmingly low numbers and are even designated under Endangered Species Act as threatened and endangered. And then the fall run, which is really the only commercially viable salmon fishery that's left at this point. And so these are all contingent on freshwater flows in our rivers and those cold water temperatures that they need. And so because of declining river flows and temperatures, we're seeing a declining population. And the commission cited during their closure of our rivers that drought and climate disruption, along with severe wildfires and associated impacts to spawning and rearing habitat, harmful algal blooms that have popped up in our delta area, and then even some ocean forage shifts that feeding that those salmon need are the cause of it, which are all true. But there is a glaring omission, our state's water policies that dramatically exacerbated those contributing issues and factors, or even flat out cause those, like the harmful algal blooms. And so this unsustainable water diversion, these policies are really changing the functionality of our rivers. It's determining how much water is allowed to actually go down our river systems, keeping these natural systems afloat, keeping these healthy fish populations, these healthy wildlife populations going, and even people and cultures that are reliant upon those systems. And when agencies deliver all the cold water to, for instance, industrial agriculture, if I wanted to kind of put the face of what's going on here is, looking at some like nut tree operations, these vast industrial agricultural companies that are growing these export crops in arid regions year round. There's no cold water left when they send it at the wrong time of the year for when salmon actually need it. And so that's why we end up with a bathtub effect, these bathtub temperatures that kill salmon eggs before they even have a chance to hatch. And that's the really sad part, because these salmon eggs start to die when temperatures really creep past 54.5 degrees. And so to put that in context, we've observed temperatures in our salmon rivers reaching over 70 degrees last year. And that just obliterates all those salmon eggs, all those eggs that are waiting to hatch, those millions of eggs that will never even get a chance to try and make it to the ocean and come back. And so after all that, what's really changed is that we've changed the landscape. It's not just in regards to river temperatures and water flows, but it's an agricultural landscape. These almond trees, for example, as I mentioned, they've gone from 500,000 acres planted in 1996 to more than 1.6 million acres in 2022 from that latest data. And previously, much of that was agricultural land with crops that would be fallowed after the harvest. And so they wouldn't require watering. Now, all of those almonds, all of those pistachios, those walnuts, all of those nut tree operations that need vast quantities of California water need it now all year long. And so we're using an unsustainable amount of water and out of our rivers, pulling it out, and that means that our salmon, those baby fish, and everybody who relies on it, and all the ecosystem functions that rely on it, all the other wildlife, are now getting the short end of the stick because those salmon populations are falling. So instead of really trying to find a balance, this we're just looking for a small piece of the water pie. We're not trying to say, oh, all agriculture, all export nets and things like that need to cease. But that is by no means. I come from a farming family and agricultural based family, and so I am with them. We want to see and all of this stuff be able to move forward and be healthy and functional and economical for everybody. But just a small piece of that water pie to increase the health of our rivers and the Bay Delta estuary, and in turn, it supports fish and people, like you mentioned. And so it's about near term band-aid actions
Mhm.
that is what is really going on at the moment from the state to try and float the whole salmon crisis to good water years. So it's like, can we just do some of these band-aid actions that will help us get to a good next functional salmon season? So it's not about finding long-term permanent solutions that we should actually be doing. And this is showing up in the governor's
Mhm.
in his salmon plan, the administration that released the salmon strategy back in January. And I really do give them props for the plan, as many of the points are things that we've been fighting to get for years. But unfortunately, and this is kind of a good point out of what's happening, there was no funding pipeline for many of those actions in the plan. And so we've actually had to step up to fight to get that funding and bonds that are coming out of the state assembly and Senate. That's the sad part. I talk with a lot of these folks and in these coastal towns, and what's a lot of people don't think, they think, oh, it's just the fishing industry or it's just the sporting goods stores, but these coastal towns that
Well,
and
Scott,
reliant upon those businesses, uh, there's all those cafes, the gas stations, the mini marts, the restaurants, the hotels, all of these other things in these coastal towns, these small coastal towns or inland river towns, don't receive that business, and so they are also affected by that. And so
right.
this
It's
is
a
a
it's a
widespread
domino
issue.
it's a domino effect. It sounds like it really seems like I mean, well, anytime one industry, especially an industry as big as the salmon industry, you're going to see that domino effect and affecting many different communities, not just one community. But I want to discuss a little more or drill down on what exactly is going on as far as the policies. You said earlier, you just want a piece of the water pie. And it seems to me that the salmon industry, the nut industry, these year-round agricultural crops that need the water. Everybody can get a piece of that water pie and be a part of that water table, if you will. So, where is this going as far as the Gavin administration is, or the Newsom, excuse me, as far as the Newsom administration is concerned? Are there folks as far as the lawmakers, the representatives? Are you in conversation with them? What is Secretary Wade Crowfoot? I mean, have you been able to have a conversation with him? Where is this going as far as policy is concerned, as far as facing off with the Newsom administration to change the policy? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great point because um, fish need water, as we all know. And if the state thinks that we can save a species without actually discussing water, or believes that water infrastructure projects designed to withhold more water from our rivers and fish and deliver more water to industrial nut export operations, then we as a state are not really serious about saving salmon or the people, the jobs, the towns, and wildlife that rely on that fishery. And so we have put in numerous requests, not even just within the past couple of years, but before that, to have a conversation with the governor on these particular issues, and have not had that request fulfilled. We have met with Wade Crowfoot, Secretary Crowfoot, and Director of Department of Fish and Wildlife, Chuck Bonham. And so we've had those conversations. But again, the policy hasn't moved forward on what actually needs to take place with that. And that's the water policy aspect. There's a lot of talk about how can we do things to increase hatchery production, and this is all stuff that we're behind. This is stuff that we're trying to do right now, and working with assembly members and senators in the state to get support through bond funds to pay for a number of these projects that would really help the fishery and help the people. And so we are making really good headway on that. There's still work to do, but that's happening, and so people understand. But at the end of the day, it's we're going to keep repeating this if we don't actually address water delivery and sustainable water use. And if it gets any worse, and I haven't even touched on just, and I'll jump back into to the policy itself, but even just the general operations of what's happening with these giant delta pumps that take this water out and divert it. They're sucking baby salmon and other fish species by the thousands. And a recent analysis of data from the Department of Fish and Wildlife shows that since 2002, state and federal water pumping from the Sacramento San Joaquin River Delta killed an estimated 600,000 Chinook salmon, 50,000 steelhead. And during February and March alone, they killed, it was approaching 4,000 Chinook in winter run. And so these are like the highest numbers in a 2 month period in 20 years. And when that happens, it is showing that there's not just a policy, but there's just the way that the operations are working too, to stack the deck against salmon and all those people that rely on it. Because those salmon in those pumps that actually do manage to survive, they're put into trucks and released back into the delta, which is good. But unfortunately, as we just observed firsthand, those fish are being dumped in the exact same spot twice a day. And so that means the agency is creating a situation where predators know exactly where to go to get an easy meal twice a day, because they're not changing it up. They're creating a Pavlov's dog situation for predator fish to eat these baby salmon that are trying to get a chance to get back into the system to survive. And so it's unbelievable when all of this money is being spent on habitat and floodplain restoration and good projects, but if we leave out the most important parts that will help the floodplain restoration projects work, water and fish, then we're ignoring the bigger problem. And so this is why, like, the policies, and here's a good example of it. The 2023 and now this year's salmon shutdowns, really, they're not coming out of the blue, because in the fall of 2020 and the spring of 2021, baby salmon that are returning this year have faced multiple threats because they have this 3-year life cycle. So they, hatch and come back 3 years later. And so we're looking at the past of what happened. And the state, the governor's administration, failed to require adequate temperature protections for salmon eggs. And so as a result, lethal hot water caused by excessive and this unsustainable agricultural water delivery killed those incubating eggs. Then secondly, the governor shut down the state water board's efforts to update Bay Delta standards that included river flow protections for out migrating salmon. And then as a result, those baby salmon did not survive their journey out of the valley here to the ocean. And then finally, the governor waived the already poor salmon standards that were in place to allow more pumping. And so as a result, the Department of Fish and Wildlife concluded that 99.7% of, just say, the winter run Chinook eggs and juveniles were killed before they even reached the Delta. And so when we look at these water policies for deliveries, and then we go and say, hey, let's create more infrastructure that is going to pull more water out instead of actually really thinking about how we can be more sustainable, then we're going to continue to see these closures. Because even with the Delta Tunnel, um, industrial agricultural water users are poised to really exploit the Delta Tunnel's benefits by getting more than 34% of new water supplies and then shifting all that burden, that cost burden, to ratepayers. And so the Delta Tunnel, for instance, offers like negligible returns and relief for droughts, and it's just going to be exacerbated by climate change. And we're spending a lot of money as opposed to really looking at climate resilient solutions like sustainable use, water conservation, recycling, a number of these things that, let's not plant more almond acreage, but other, crops that can feed Californians and the nation. And so that's where we're at. It's a stacked deck. And what we're trying to do is just get the system with a small band-aid to say, hey, let's try and increase some hatchery production, which is great, like I said, but we can't just focus on that. We have to focus on the river flows and temperatures if we really want to save salmon. And that's not what we're doing. All of that is what is, we've been told is not feasible by the agencies. And when you say that's not feasible, that means that nobody's serious about saving salmon from a state perspective.
So, and thank you for that. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for all the work you do. That is the voice of Scott Artis. Okay, folks, Scott Artis is the executive director for Golden State Salmon Association. Golden State Salmon Association. Now, this is just, it floors me because salmon is, I mean, just as far as customer consumption, consumers are concerned, it's all over the place. I mean, it's in every grocery store, so I don't understand how the Newsom administration can turn a blind eye to the industry just in that single aspect alone. Not even looking at the ecological part of it, the natural progression of what salmon do and how they feed the animals and contribute to the ecological cycle, uh, et cetera, et cetera. So it just floors me that their administration is not listening, is not trying to listen, isn't trying to contribute to the conversation to try to make it better. So can we get a little bit more? Can we drill down a little bit more as far as your conversations with Secretary Crowfoot and folks? He is the Secretary of California's Natural Resources Agency. I mean, how did that conversation go? I mean, was he listening? Was he acting like he was listening? Did he try to present any type of reasoning for this being the second year of this huge loss, a huge salmon industry loss? Talk to us about that, because I mean that's what it comes down to. Unfortunately, and fortunately, that's what it comes down to. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, that's our last conversation with him on this issue is actually spawning out of the first salmon season closure. And really what the ask was from them to us was, can we take it easy on the governor and not be so harsh? And that was
Not
really
be so harsh. Are you serious right
that
now?
that's correct. Yeah. And so I was asked not to, if we could tone it down and not be so critical. And like I said, and I told them that I am more than happy to provide the props, give those congratulations on good stuff coming out, just like we did with the salmon plan. It's like, this is some good stuff, but we got to make sure that these things actually move forward and that we talk about temperatures and flows and the big issues as well. But that's correct. So that is what we get back from that is, can we tone it down and not be so critical when people are losing their jobs? And this isn't just even jobs from fishermen and women. This is the domino effect, as you rightly pointed out, that is ice makers and you know um, fish processors and markets and restaurants and hotels. It just really spans out, and it's the everyday people that are feeling the effect. And then there's a whole entire community of Native Americans and indigenous people that um, that tell me their stories of how their community and culture is being impacted by this. And there's people in the Delta, frontline communities that are dealing with toxic algal blooms, and they can't use the Delta, the rivers out there. They can't, their pets can't go in the water because of these hazardous and toxic algal blooms. And so that comes from heated water and lower flows. And so this is more than just a
Mm.
salmon fishery issue. This is a California-wide issue and stretches into, as I said, other states like Oregon. And so if we're afraid that to talk about the actual problems, and if they're afraid that we're being too critical, then I use that as an open invitation to come. Let's set up a meeting and talk about what are those next steps, because we can't sweep this under the rug if we don't want to see more closures into the future, because more closures into the future means the salmon are not doing well. And we could have a bump or two, and we could have open season here and there because of good water years, but we're never going to solve the problem. And we'll continue seeing this. May not just be every year, but it will be a recurring cycle that is exacerbated by climate change,
Most
and
definitely.
we're going to see
Yeah.
more of it.
Yeah. No doubt. No
It
doubt.
is really incredible. Yeah,
I'm floored. I'm floored by the reaction of Secretary Wade Crowfoot. I'm floored by the fact that he felt it necessary to even go there on that level. Is it possible? I mean, what needs to happen now is that the coalition, the coalition needs to be brought together and pulled in tight, and next steps, folks need to be voted out of office. Those are the next steps that need to happen, because 2 years in a row, there's going to be a third, there's going to be a fourth, and they're going to push for a fifth.
that's right.
So in that regard, I think just my perspective on the whole situation, uh, you need to pull your crew together, Scott Artis, and make a plan, because that what's happening now is indicative of what's going to happen in the future. And that future needs to be dictated by you and a coalition of organizations that are affected by these lackadaisical policies. So I would push for that. How can people get in touch with you, or how can people get more information about what's going on? I know, of course, you got a website. Go ahead and give out that website, Scott Ortiz.
Sure. And thanks for that. It's goldenstatesalmon.org. And they can also reach directly out to me at scott@goldenstatesalmon.org. I'm happy to respond, and it may take a couple days to get back as things are quite busy. But always happy to engage and again mobilize people, because you nailed it, Sabrina. This is a coalition issue, and this is in fact what we are working on, and we're part of a growing coalition that has taking new steps and new directions, and starting to come together to think of out of the box solutions that haven't been tried in new directions, because bringing everybody together. This is a coalition of not just fishing interests, but it's conservation, environmental justice, tribal leadership, and tribes, and so it's bringing all of this together. Wildlife conservation. So it's all of these issues and groups that are coming together, because they're all being impacted, and we have a common thread that California water is not being managed sustainably, and it's harming not just the fishing industry, tens of thousands of jobs, but now millions of people.
No doubt, no doubt. All right. Well, Scott, let's stay in touch, and yeah, let's definitely keep this conversation going. This is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. Folks, that was the voice of Scott Ortiz, and Scott is the Golden State Salmon Association Executive Director. And all this information will be posted on the KPFA website, kpfa.org, A Rude Awakening, and on social media as well. Scott Artis, thank you so much for being on the show. Truly appreciate you taking the time. Looking forward to speaking with you in the very near future. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sabrina. You're doing a great job highlighting and showcasing the critical fight that we are currently undertaking.
Thank you. I appreciate it.